Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. We have a great show lined up. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Dr. Maria Nilsson and John Ward about their new discovery in Gebel el Silsila. And in the second hour, we're going to be speaking with Carmen Bolder about some new discoveries on the Giza Plateau. So an exciting show today. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can find out about all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. So if there's stuff going on in your life, give me a call, send me an email, and we can set up a time for a private consultation. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free 50-page guide. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And if you haven't gotten a copy of my new movie, Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, it's still only $1.99 by digital download on Amazon.com. And I've also been putting up some of my video shorts on there. So if you've been interested in some of the other work that I've been doing, they are also available on Amazon.com for digital download. $1.99. Can't beat it. You can't even buy a cup of Starbucks coffee for that much. Anyway, let me tell you about this hour's guests, and we will bring them on the air. Dr. Maria Nilsson is an archaeologist and mission director at Gebel el Silsila Epigraphic Survey Project. Following the formal debate in defense of her doctoral thesis on Hellenistic Queen Arsinoe II's crown at Gothenburg University, Maria now focuses her research on the relatively new topic pseudo-script, primarily Ptolemaic and Roman quarry marks at Gebel el Silsila, Egypt. That research has now led her and John to the new discovery of the lost temple of Kanu at Gebel el Silsila, where with John and her phenomenal team, they're continuing to make discoveries and expanding the preservation of the site and its antiquities. John Ward is an ancient historian, archaeologist, explorer, adventurer, author, professional dowser, radio host, and father, residing in Luxor, Egypt. Having published, presented, lectured, and given workshops on numerous articles and papers concerning his research, John has conducted innumerable investigations pertaining to ancient Egyptian architecture and symbolism, while also carrying out research into the many mysteries surrounding medieval Templarism and esoteric, hermetic, and alchemical teachings, and innumerable other subjects associated with ancient symbolism. Their website is friendsofsicila.com, so please welcome Dr. Maria Nilsson and John Ward. Hey guys, how are you?
Hello.
Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction, Rita.
And I even didn't make too many mistakes, which is always great.
And what was the name of the queen that Maria studied for most of her adult life?
That was Hatshepsut, right?
Arsene?
Don't worry, John just calls her Arsie.
You said assy? No.
Exactly. There's been many jokes back and forwards on that one. Bless her, the queen.
Well, I've never heard of her, but you don't really hear about Egyptian queens except for one or two here or there, which I think is very interesting.
Well, the great thing is that with the book and that it reached, it made world news within just a couple of days after the thesis was released. She actually become on an equal status with Queen Hatshepsut that most people know of. So it's quite a nice thing, actually.
In all practicality, she became a pharaoh. So.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think it's interesting because if she was Hellenistic, that would put her around the time of Cleopatra. So was she related to Cleopatra?
Absolutely. She's the same dynasty. And much of what Cleopatra did was because of My Queenie and all the iconography or what you call the image, the details in the images, that's based on My Queen. So there's a lot of continuity in Cleopatra later.
Interesting. We're going to talk today about your new discovery at Gebel el Silsila. But as a way of introduction, John, you were on the show before, so you got to kind of talk a little bit about yourself. And I'm going to say a microscopic amount about yourself. But working as an archaeologist in Egypt or an would you guys consider yourselves Egyptologists?
It's a definition question that many actually continue to debate today, because some they suggest that you have to be able to read professionally hieroglyphs and be taught in the art of the hieroglyphs, while others say that all archaeologists working in Egypt, they should by definition be called an Egyptologist. Now, I worked a bit with hieroglyphs in my thesis, the later, the Greek and Roman hieroglyphs, so it's not the nice and proper academic hieroglyphs, but fair dues, I know some of it. But we are working as archaeologists in Egypt, so sure, Egyptologist, archaeologist, doesn't matter. Archaeologist working in Egypt, fair enough.
Okay. How did you chance upon the opportunity to work there? I don't know that I've ever even asked you that, John, either. I think for a lot of people, all right, for me, going to be able to dig around in the sand and find cool stuff was like a dream when I was a kid. How did you guys manage to be able to do it for a career?
Well, you should get yourself a box of Kleenex tissues first, because it's such a romantic, weepy story. It's full of woe, romanticism, tidal waves.
Well, it might be so for you, but for me, it's all hard work.
And sweat. That's what the Kleenex are for, right?
As Rita said, I'm always on the show and I'm always bleating along. So why don't you tell them?
Well,
share the story.
There is a romantic side to the story, but what most people forget and don't see is actually all the hard work that's behind it. It's not just to go and take a brush to the sand and remove a bit and whoops, there you found a treasure. It's so much more than that. And I mean, we spend 2 to 3 months a year just finding funding to be out there. And of course, that's time that we rather spend on researching and getting the material out to the public. But that's the reality of the profession. But there is a romantic side to it, and for me personally, I always knew since I was a kid what I wanted to do, and I always wanted to go to Egypt. So it was really just a matter of following the educational rules and getting a doctorate and then moving on from that. And it was while I was studying as a doctoral student that I met John in Aswan, and it was actually by chance that we stopped at Gebel el Silsila because
you make it sound so boring and so academic. I mean, there we were. We met across that wonderful chaise longue in that amazing 10-star hotel with the cockroaches and the one man that doubled up as the receptionist, the waiter, the bag man.
Did I mention that I was a doctoral student at the time and had no money, so we had to stay?
It wasn't a case of no money. You were just so tight.
I
so tight. You chose the worst hotel in the whole of Upper Egypt for us to stay in.
Actually,
bearing in mind, Rita, I had never met this girl before. All we'd had was conversations over emails. We hadn't even Skyped each other. And this is going back now 8 years?
Yeah.
8 years.
Yeah.
And she basically turned around, and her question was, the brief for me, because at that time I had my own tour company in Egypt, the brief for me was to facilitate. Maria's request was to be at each temple for more than an hour, and preferably a day.
Well, the reason why I had to contact John was because at the time we had a convoy system in Egypt. So you couldn't just drive down to a temple and stay there all day. You were actually locked to...
You were duty bound to stay with the convoy. So you were able to stay at the temple sites for 1 hour and then back onto the coach and onto the next temple. And that's how the convoy system worked in Upper Egypt.
And of course, that wasn't enough for me.
No. So I had to devise a plan in which she could spend an entire day. And the only way we could do it on a shoestring, because she was so tight, was that to hire a little tiny sailing boat, what we call a felucca in Egypt. And it's literally a four-man boat, really, with a main sail.
No toilet.
No toilet. No TV.
I don't know. I kind of draw the line of no toilet.
It has a view.
Yes.
It had a view.
Yeah.
You didn't have a cabin. We all slept on the same deck.
Yep.
And we sailed the Nile. And our felucca captain, we'd done the stops at the other temples, and he was coming round the bend, and he said, there's Pharaonic henna, meaning there's Pharaonic here, a Pharaonic side. And do you want to stop? And Maria looked at me, I looked at Maria, I said, well, we got tired, why not? And we stopped, and we pulled up on the west bank of Silsila at that time, and Julie paid our tickets. And no, we didn't have to pay for tickets.
No, we didn't have to pay for tickets.
We had our passes then.
Archaeological passes, that's the beauty.
That's it. And then we walked the banks. And you take it from there, darling.
Well, we stepped into the temple that is known as the Spears of Horemheb, which, by the way, we have changed the chronology for that, so we shouldn't be calling it that anymore.
Not the Spears,
but
no.
Nevertheless, a rock-cut temple. And we walked in there and we looked at it, and it was all nice, typical pharaonic. Yeah, we stepped outside, and
so blasé.
And it was actually on the backside of that rock-cut temple that we both stood fascinated in front of a series of symbols that had been carved into one of the quarry faces. And for different reasons, we both started to jump up and down in joy. And we kind of looked at each other, bemused by the other's reaction. And we realized that there was something more there to be seen. And ever since then, I mean, we gave the site a promise that we would return, and we would try to study these symbols in more detail, and that we would make justice to the site, and that people finally would get to know the site of Gebel el Silsila, and that was 8 years ago. So it's quite fantastic to stand on site and know that we kept our promise. And I mean, since then, we catalogued over 5,000 of these sacred quarry marks, and we broke much of the code that surround them. So soon, we're hoping that the first book on them will come out, and there's been a series of articles as well, but we're hoping that the book will soon be out.
Exciting. Where in Egypt is Gebel el Silsila?
Well, it's between the more famous cities of Luxor and Aswan, so about 130 kilometers. Yeah. It doesn't say anything.
It's midway. It's midway between the ancient sites of Edfu and Komombo. They're the two main sites that most people will know who they've been to Egypt. But if you bring up Google Earth and pinpoint those two sites, just type in Edfu or Komombo, and you'll bring those sites up on Google Earth, and you'll see a little narrow stretch of the Nile. And you'll see two land masses either side of the Nile where it becomes really, really thin. It's very, very narrow. And that's the narrowest point of the Nile for the whole stretch of the Nile, in fact, from Ethiopia all the way down to the Mediterranean. This is the narrowest it ever gets. And that's our site, Silsila. And it stretches, as I say, both the East Bank and the West Bank. Maria is in charge, really. And we have one of the largest archaeological sites in the whole of Egypt. It is truly massive site, spanning, as I say,
we got
the East
30
Bank,
square kilometers.
30 square kilometers, which is just over 12 miles squared.
Wow.
It's huge. And we've walked it all.
Almost.
Well, you were saying that it was had been a quarry. Was this quarry used to get stones like granite that were, you hear the stories that they quarried them at Aswan and then put them on a barge and then sent them up the Nile. So was this one of the quarries that are referred to?
Yes. I mean,
it's almost the same story, but we got sandstone instead of granite, which is a much softer stone. But it's basically, our site is the physical mother of all the famous temples in Egypt. So Karnak and Luxor Temple, the Ramesseum, all of them, they have stone that originates in Gebel el Silsila.
Any idea how long this site was in use?
Well, it depends on what you mean in use, because
they were quarrying it, I guess. I don't know. Go ahead.
We got evidence of since at least 1500 BC, but we got activity on site that goes back at least 10,000 years.
Just from people living there?
Yes, living and visiting, just passing by, because obviously the early visitors to the site, they were nomadic, so they wouldn't put a proper foot down, so to say.
One of the things to bear in mind here, Rita, is that, as I said before, both the East and West Bank are like islands, for want of a better word. When the Nile was in flood season, both the East Bank and West Bank would become these virtual islands in the floodplain. So you can imagine every single living thing, anything that slithers and slimes and crawls or walks, would make its way to these two islands for safety from the floodwaters. Now, what Maria is referring to, where we can take back to 10,000 years, is mostly the rock art, where we've got depictions of various scenes of hunter-gatherers, geometric patterns, and other such like, which is strewn across the entire site.
But we also got the flint tools.
And the flint tools and the microlithic tools and so forth. So it is a virtual, there's evidence of virtual industries there, where Maria's quite rightly saying, the nomadic tribes would come in, they would do their hunting and gathering, they would probably fish or hunt, and then leave the site afterwards when the floodwaters actually went down. So it's an amazing site itself.
The rock art, the really old, that's what I'm interested in, the really old rock art that you have found from a stylistic or an iconographical point of view, does it resemble more art that you would find in South Africa, Ethiopia, or more what you would find in the, I guess it would be the central continent, by Nap the Playa, kind of out, have to think.
Yeah. It depends on what period you're looking at, because the further back we go, we got rock art from a period that's called the Epipaleolithic, which is about 8,500 years ago. And during that time, the motifs that they made, it's very difficult for us today to actually answer what they depict, because they haven't got a firm shape. There's a lot of geometrical patterns, curvilinear types, ladders, and so forth. And there's been attempts to try to determine what they depict, but it's a very dangerous path to go down. But then when you come down towards the pre-dynastics, which is about 6,000 years ago, then we have something that's called the Ethiopian fauna, which is depictions of giraffes, hippopotami, crocodiles and so forth. So it really depends on what period you're looking at. But it's personally, I find the Epipaleolithic, the older motifs, much more interesting because they are embedded in this mystery.
Well, and it just seems very consistent that prior to 5 or 6,000 BC, representational art just wasn't happening all that much, globally speaking. And we did find a lot more of the geometric type patterns that nobody understands, and people even contest whether it's even art.
Well, it is art. I believe that it is art, but then again, you can ask if graffiti is art, and some of the modern creations are art as well. It's in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? But I think that you shouldn't exclude that from art when you include so much else in it, regardless of the connotations that come with it, with religion and so forth, or if you believe that it has a protective force and so forth. Regardless of that, it's still a creation by someone who believed that it was important enough to save for the afterward world.
And it's a means of communication. I mean, that's what
it is.
We've got sites at Silsila, Rita, where you can literally you're walking along the desert plain, and you don't exactly stumble upon them, but they're just laying there still. These lovely rock formations that are adorned with this graffiti and this rock art, and you've got to bear in mind the landscape hasn't changed. It hasn't changed in over 6,000 years, 8,000 years, 10,000 years. These places where we've got the microlithic sites, where we've got these little shards of flints, where the nappings, the small, very microlithic nappings, hence the reason why microlithic workshops, they're just laying there. So, and you can see where the man would have sat because he's surrounded by, in a kind of circular fashion, these nappings. And so you can tell that nothing's changed on the landscape itself in over 10,000 years. And so when you look at the rock art that's in the same kind of situ, in the same kind of environment, you've got to say to yourself, well, what was his means? What was he trying to communicate to his fellow man or woman? Were they there as a tribe? Were they there as a group? Or was he there as an individual, and was someone else going to come by and look at his motif and think, oh, and then interpret what he had actually knocked into the stone itself using another stone? It really is open to interpretation.
But in the end of the day, the nice thing about all our representations, regardless of their age, if we accept now the oldest part that we can't determine, is that there are some motifs that continue throughout. We got boats, and we got certain depictions of animals, certain people and so forth. So there are elements in the natural surrounding that would have had such an impact on the people that they wanted to express some form of belonging to that.
Coneheads,
Yes.
Coneheads.
Coneheads.
I'm going to go, okay, so are there elongated skulls there? Why conehead?
It's an ongoing debate between us and other scholars that have been to the site.
No, actually, there is a discussion among prehistoric experts who look at rock art from the Epipaleolithic period, and there is a certain form of representation that some believe could represent an early form of a human. And possibly that they are depicted with something that could represent the white crown, which is one of Egypt's crowns. And they, as John say, they look like cone heads.
Mm-hmm.
Or a crocodile, if you look at it from a different perspective.
Yes, well, so you say.
I think it's a crocodile.
Well, and one of the things that I believe personally is that when our ancestors created, and I'm going to say figurative art, whether it's, a geometric pattern or a giraffe, there was a much deeper intrinsic meaning that today we don't get. And with that meaning, there was a whole story that went along with it.
Oh, exactly.
But it's also because today we're so keen on putting everything in folders and separating things, while for the ancients everything was connected. They didn't separate religion from everyday life. For them, religion was everything. Everything in nature had a religious part. and they were just one among the others within one big sphere. So for them, there was no difference, and I think that's the problem we got today. We got too disorientated in our wish to fold everything up.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch gears here a little bit. Recently, you guys announced news of a new discovery at Gebel el Silsila. Is that the whole? I mean, is that the proper way to say the whole thing, or is Silsila the actual name, like the Gebel El? Is that what does that mean?
Gebel is mountain. El is the. Silsila means chain. Right. So it's the mountain of the chain, basically, in Arabic, if you were to translate it into English. So basically, it's the mountain. The Gebel El, the mountain, Silsila, chain. But you can just call it Silsila.
Okay. So what did you guys find?
Can't tell you.
I mean, because I know it's not a secret, because when I talked to you last time, John, it was a secret. And now the secret's going to be revealed.
Shh. Go for it, Maria.
It's the big reveal.
Your big discovery. Go ahead.
It was our big discovery.
Of course it was.
Our big discovery. Basically, what we've done is following an old map, which we rediscovered in the archives of the EES, which is the Egyptian Exploration Society in London, and working from another map that we'd also seen within the previous journals, which was usually it says X marks the spot usually, but in this case it was the letter T. T marked the spot.
T marked temple.
T marked temple, yeah. And so we use this map to try and configure exactly where in Silsila this temple, so-called temple, was going to be.
Well, the fact is that throughout research, everyone who's visited Silsila before us, there's been mentioning of a supposed temple of Ramses II, and no one is really going out with the location of such.
Well, I think it's fair to say when you say everyone,
well, everyone
who's ever written
yes.
about Silsila has repeated
exactly.
what was originally written. So
yes.
even if they hadn't even seen it, they still mention it as if they had seen it, but they hadn't.
Yes.
I mean, really and truly, only one person probably, or two people, have actually ever really seen.
Yes.
And that was probably like in the mid 1800s, right?
Well, it's even earlier. Yeah, it was in the very beginning of the 18th century, and it's ridiculous that it's just 19th century, sorry. Even though it's just continued from there, people have just regurgitated the same material, and it wasn't until, as Maria was about to say, until we started going through the literature and started going through the archives, and then we put all that together. And then when we were on site, the very, very first morning, it was actually quite secret. we got up, we're all ready, we're all bushy-eyed and bright-tailed. We're on our dahabir. We know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go and find the long-lost temple of Keni. And we get all our equipment. We're all on the boat. The dog's on the boat. Freya is on the deck, waving to us from the deck with Susie, her nanny. And we're there, and the engine, he's pulling the cord on the engine, the outboard motor, to get it going. And it's kind of going plop, 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 plop. And the bloody thing wouldn't start. And so it was, we had to basically get everything off the boat and choose a different location. We actually went back up to a place which we call Pottery Hill, which is another little area, which is a series of stone huts set out in a circular formation. And we cleaned the areas there and had a look at that for a couple of days while we had the engine repaired. And as soon as the engine was repaired, we then got everything back on the boat, and then we rushed over to the East Bank.
And we found it.
And we found the temple. First of all, protruding from the sands, we saw the foundations of the 3 columns that were just protruding out of the dust, kind of thing.
Now, we have to admit to ourselves.
And you didn't notice it before?
No, that's what I was just about to say. We have to admit that it's quite embarrassing that we haven't seen it before, because we passed that area so many times.
Probably more times we've had hot dinners.
Yes.
And everybody else.
Yes. Of course.
Because it's on the main road actually into Silsila.
And they were actually planning to make a car park there. So
well, the thing was that we discovered it. We made the announcement. We rang the inspectorate in Komombo and in Aswan to our bosses, basically, and said, look, we found it, XYZ. And we're all jumping up and down. And they turned around, one of the inspectors who was with us, and said, well, this specific area, no. We want to turn this into a car park. We said no.
But of course, his boss and bosses, they quite soon stopped all plans of doing so.
Everything was stopped, and they gave us permission to continue with the cleaning procedures. And we basically spent the remaining of the season cleaning back barrel loads of sand and dirt and stone and other bits of debris. As we revealed what was left of the foundations. Now, you've got to remember here, and it's a little bit difficult to kind of envisage, but if you can imagine a bedrock surface, parts of it has been pre-dressed to receive the new flooring, so to speak. Parts of it have been dressed that resemble the bases of the columns. Some areas have been dressed which would then outline the internal or external walls of the temple, the structure itself. But as for block work, all of that had actually been quarried away. The Romans, we presume, given the amount of pottery that we had there as evidence for that, were the ones who actually quarried the remains of the temple away and took it to a different location. Whether they
just used it as
a spoil, but they may have even taken the temple as itself and really just relocated it, and that's something that we want to look into over the coming years.
That's your thing.
That's my positivistic thinking, and I'm allowed to have that. So be quiet.
And
but during that process of cleaning back, of course, we were pulling out of the sand, basically literally pulling out the sand, the cartouches of Ramesses II, the cartouches of Amenhotep III, limestone fragments with beautiful Tuthmoside type of relief on them, which was totally exquisite.
And this
scarabs.
Hold on, because what you're saying now is actually quite important, because everyone who mentioned this temple before, they say that it was a destroyed temple of Ramses II. And of course, we now have the cartouches and iconography that predate that quite far. So we take it back for several generations, and we can present 4 or 5 chronological phases rather than just the Temple of Ramses. So that in itself is fantastic.
I think one of the important things here is the excitement that we've got the transition there, Rita, between limestone and sandstone, and this is something that it's been talked about before. And of course, if you go to places like Karnak or Luxor Temple or the Ramesseum, Medina Habu, there you will see within the foundation deposits other remnants of previous temples that were there, that once stood there previous to the temple that's there today.
What John is trying to say is that during the Middle Kingdom and up towards the 18th dynasty, everyone almost built their temples in either mud brick or in limestone.
Except for Mentuhotep.
Yes. But after the 18th dynasty, there is this very clear change where they start to build everything in sandstone, and all the temples that we have from that period in Upper Egypt, they have beautiful, strong sandstone from Silsila. So what we're looking at on site is we actually have the limestone foundation of an original temple from the early 18th dynasty, and then a continuation into sandstone, where we're looking at the possibility of having not only a change in the style, but actually possibly we might have stumbled upon one of the reasons why it changed. So they might have built a temple in limestone and realized how easy it was to work in the sandstone, and realized the capability.
I think they realized that the two architectural components can go together quite well, and that you can use sandstone. Yes, but also what has hand
at Gebel el Silsila, they realized the potential of the site, and after that, we like to see it as a bridge, that the building of the limestone temple at Gebel el Silsila offered a bridge into the sandstone.
What you're saying, let me just clarify, is that because of the construction of the temple, that's when they discovered that sandstone was an easier material to work with, and then they started quarrying it there. Would that be a correct statement?
Well, I mean, what you've got to look at, Rita, is that Gebel el Silsila itself, previously, during the Pharaonic period, there is something that we also discovered late last year as well, was that there's a land bridge between the East Bank and the West Bank. Now, that land bridge, we kind of assuming it's an hypothesis that we're working with in conjunction with Professor Jim Harold from Toledo University, who's our geologist on site. Amazing man, by the way. A master of masters and a beautiful man. We love him to bits.
Yes.
Apart from that, but what we're looking at is a land bridge, which could have been possibly what we refer to in Egypt as a cataract, what you would refer to as a waterfall, really. It was a place which would have blocked the water, the flow of the Nile. And remember that both the East Bank and West Bank were or are islands during the inundation. So you've got the part of the Nile here that is completely unnavigable. You wouldn't have been able to pass a boat through that narrow gorge. And so during the flood season, boats would be able to circumnavigate the islands around them and then continue southwards up the Nile. But during the low season, when the Nile was at its lowest point, the gorge would turn into a cataract, making it totally impassable. And of course, the Nile would no longer be circumnavigating these two islands. And so therefore, it would be cut off from the rest of Egypt. You wouldn't be able to navigate that part of the Nile. That being said, then, we were looking then at a possible beginning of the site as a place of worship or a place, a settlement, i.e. Keni or Kenu, depending on how you want to translate that or even pronounce it. And so we've got, first of all, at this present moment, what we've got evidence for is this limestone temple. I'd like to say that we may have something before it, but we don't have that yet. So at the moment, we've got a limestone temple that is datable to round about 1500 BC, thereabouts, 18th dynasty. We've then got the usurpation of that limestone temple by the later pharaohs of, let's say, the house of Amenhotep. We then have that sandstone, and this is where it becomes very important, because the sandstone block or fragment that we pulled out, which has the cartouche of Amenhotep III. Now, he was the grandfather of Tutankhamun, the father of Akhenaten, which all your audience are probably familiar with. That fragment is very, very important and is unique, according to Dr. Philippe Martinez, our Egyptologist, our epigrapher on site. Now, Philippe has got over 30 years worth of experience in epigraphy and researching and literally staring at tons of stone fragments. And what it is that this particular stone fragment has been usurped. And so what has happened here is Amenhotep III has actually erased the previous name on the sandstone block. So it proves that there was a pharaoh already using sandstone prior to Amenhotep III and after the Thutmose period. So we've got somebody in between. So we do have another pharaoh there. So we do have another transitional period to look at. And then, of course, we then go into the time of Ramesses II and so forth.
To answer your question and go back to that, the transition is also because what we have on the West Bank is a series of false tombs or cenotaphs, shrines that have been cut straight into the rock. Now, there's 32 of them recorded so far, and they all belong to the period of Queen Hatshepsut and Thutmose III. And we now have evidence that the rock cut temple on the other side is most likely of that period as well. So we believe that, as you said, that while they were working with this limestone temple, they realized how easy it was to work with the sandstone, and we may have there the starting point for it.
Well, that would be a huge find. I mean, especially if what you're saying about there being this, I'm going to say, huge cultural shift, huge building material shift that happened from, the Middle Kingdom to the Late Kingdom in going from limestone to sandstone, then this would be kind of potentially the birthplace.
So yes, it was basically the transition between limestone and sandstone. You are correct.
A catalyst.
A catalyst. You are correct there, Rita. And it does have huge, not only historical importance, but cultural importance as well, as far as Egyptological research is concerned. And
we're very much looking forward to returning in the autumn or winter. There's many questions still unanswered, and
still a lot to clean back. I mean,
there is
another thing that Professor Jim Howard was able to pinpoint for us and to kind of show to us was that the temple sits on what would have been an outcrop. So again, we've got this use of the Nile as a boundary. It would have been an island itself, cut off from the rest of Silsila, possibly.
And that's something that our 3D digital team is working on and hoping to reconstruct in terms of a short video to show how the Nile rose up towards the temple and flooded around it.
And I will say this now, just a shameless plug. I will be bringing some of this material with me to the Paradigm Symposium this October. So especially the 3D imagery.
Ooh, excellent.
So that would be fantastic to show to the audience and the attendees of the conference. I'm looking forward to that.
Are you going to be there, Maria?
We'll see.
Okay, but say yes, because then we can hang out. Girl power, come on. There's only so many of us going to be there.
It all depends on funding, It's time is precious, and it all depends on. Unfortunately, it depends on the monetary situation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, given our circumstances and given the financial circumstances of Europe at the present moment, we're plowing everything we have, personally wise, into Silsila, and we continue, and we have always done that, but we're continuing to do that. And as we, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which way you look at this, the more we find, the more we need, equipment-wise, team-wise, and all of that boils down to costs, I'm afraid. And so even though the site is providing us with these absolutely amazing discoveries, it costs us more each year because we need to increase our team and equipment to do so, to continue the work. So it is, and hence the reason why we started, actually, all seriousness, that's why we started the Friends of Silsila, where we hope to garner membership from people who, like-minded people who are interested in the site, who want to continue with the preservation and the
and even have the possibility to join as volunteer.
And join as a volunteer on site and put their fingers and their hands into the sands of time, so to speak, and rip forth some wonderful historical artifacts.
Or if there's just someone who is wealthy and happy to support us, I mean, that's fine, that too.
We're looking for the next Lord Carnarvon. You want to fill those boots, Rita?
Sure. Will you take $1?
Yes, we will. Many dollars will make light work.
Well, see, then you could be a dollionaire. I'm a dollionaire.
Every dollar counts. Every dollar counts. We are serious there. But
let me ask you. I mean, you made a comment about volunteers. I know that, like at the Bosnian Pyramid, they have people that come and volunteer to help dig and explore. And I know that there are a lot of places that you can go and work for free and pay all of your own expenses, but you have to sign up for a college course or do all of this jumping through hoops before you can do anything. Will what you're doing be set up the same way, or will it be a little more open to just regular people to come and...
Our program will allow members of the Friends of Silsila to have the opportunity to join as a volunteer. The only thing that we need to sort out is that we need documentation, so passports and a CV and so forth, just for the public records, to send in each year when we send in our renewable
The only hoops that we have to jump through, Rita, really are the security hoops that are put in place by the Egyptian Ministry for Antiquity, which is a good thing. I want to speak honestly there. So they don't just allow any Tom, Dick, or Harry to go on site and start digging around. So basically, our volunteer program through the Friends of Silsila will allow anyone, and I must stress that, anyone, regardless of their experience, to be on site with us and work as part of the team, cataloging, documenting, recording, photographing, cleaning, and so forth on the site amongst us, living on the boat with us, and
Of course, under our supervision.
Under our supervision.
And guidance.
And guidance. And as long as they make coffee.
Yes, of course.
Oh, no, then I'm totally screwed. So I guess they don't want people to take like statues and kind of put them in their, roll them up in their socks and put it in their luggage and take them home. I guess there's kind of, they would frown on that a little bit.
Yeah, we do. We frown on that kind of activity.
I think we do more than that.
Yeah.
More than frown.
Yeah.
Rats.
Put them up against them and shoot them.
Yeah, no, not maybe not that. We can lock them in somewhere.
Feed them to the crocodiles.
Yes, put them down in Lake.
It's actually, all joking aside, I'd like to mention Shelby, who's going to be joining us this season, actually, this coming season. She's from America, and we met at the Paradigm Symposium 2012, in fact, when I first met you, Rita.
Well, excellent.
And she was a lovely young girl then with her father, and she had a very healthy interest in archaeology, and she's pursued that ever since. And she's worked, as far as I'm aware now, if I remember rightly, she's worked in South America and other places alongside various institutions. And through our friendship, through the Paradigm Symposium, and through a discourse with Maria as well, because Maria's kind of given us some pointers as in which direction to go career-wise in educational career, she's going to be joining us as a volunteer this coming season. So she's going to be with us, utilizing it. And that's the beauty of the Paradigm Symposium, if I may just again point that out, that it brings all these different people together and allows these things to happen. It is a bridge, as I've always said. There you go. That's enough for me.
Okay. Well, we're getting kind of close on time. But let me ask this question kind of as a pull it all together. How does the finding of this site, how do you think it's going to change history? Or
it already has.
Yes, it has.
It already has. I mean, first and foremost, what people need to know is that Gebel el Silsila is not just a sandstone quarry. It is a sacred site. And I mean, we go out each morning and as Shelby will notice herself during the winter, is that I'm quite strict in my policy in how to greet the site each morning as we go out there. And it's always a military action saying, "Good morning, Madame Silsila," because the site is the mother of all the temples and she deserves some recognition. So we treat her like the lady she is. But no, the site needs to be recognized as a sacred site and not just a working place. And I think that for the modern person who hear the word quarry, they reflect upon it and associate it with a hard working environment of men. Now, there is so much more at Silsila, and finding the temple that was in use before they even started opening the large quarries there, that shows that it was a sacred site before it was quarried. So it's changed a lot of the history already. But we're working also on a lot of other details that unfortunately we can't share yet.
Okay, stay tuned for part 2.
Yes.
Okay. Is the quarry, because you mentioned that you had to go across the Nile to find the temple. So is the quarry on one side and then the temple on the other side?
No, we got temples and quarries on both sides of the Nile.
Okay. Where my mind is going is if there is a temple, then that says there has to be a certain population base in order to support the temple. And John, you were saying earlier about how there was the rapids there and it wasn't really passable. So it seems conceivable to me that it could have been like a trade location, or, there was a big hotel there where people came and waited for the waters to rise.
You're actually picking up on something that is close to our hearts.
Well, we know that the site had its own governor. Yes. We know that it's been described as a town in papyrus and so forth. So it was a town of sort. But as far as the archaeological material can show, we only have small workers' villages so far. So it's one of the things that we're still looking for. Where is the town of Qenu? And of course, the best way to find an ancient city is to look where the small modern city is. And we got one of those in Nag el Hammam, an area just north of Silsila on the west bank, and it's quite likely that was the center of the town, and that's close to where we found also Middle Kingdom inscriptions with the name of the governor of Qenu. So yes, it definitely had some form of infrastructure that worked as a town or whatever. Yeah.
Yes, most definitely.
Is that enclosed in your 12-mile chunk of land?
It does.
It does indeed.
So you can go dig around there anytime you want.
Pretty much, yes.
But see, to me, that's so exciting. I mean, people laugh at me, we have the house and I'll go out in the yard, and I mean, one piece of our lot, it was like a junk pile, I swear to God. And I'll take my little spade and my little 3-prong rake thing, and I'll start digging down. And I found 50 pounds of copper wire, and they were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "It's my little archaeological expedition." So, I mean, I'm digging up this, but it ended up being 50 pounds. So it was treasures in my backyard. It's always good. Yeah. But see, you have 12 miles to play with. And so much that no one even knows anything about. That's so exciting.
Can I just say square to that?
Square.
Yes.
Square miles.
Square. It's quite a large
area. It's huge if you think about that.
It is huge.
It is massive, and Maria does take us on what we call Maria's fun walks now and again, which are not fun. They last an entire day.
They are wonderful.
They're not wonderful. There's nothing fun about them. There's nothing wonderful about them. It's like torture.
But we always discover great things.
Yes, you do.
But she lets you have water, so it's all good.
Yes.
Only warm, hot, sticky water. That's been, yes.
Well, that's not by my choice. It's the weather.
Yes, I do actually have my creature comforts. I have my cup of coffee and my porcelain, my china cup that's carried for me.
Okay, by the servants on their head in a basket.
I carry everything myself, I may add.
I refuse to do that.
Yeah. But
so British.
I mean, I hope you don't fan them and feed them any grapes, Maria.
You got to be kidding me.
Maybe it's the other way around, which would be much better in my opinion.
I think it is the other way around. We did have a chaise longue in our cabin in the stateroom that we have in our dahaber, but Maria removed that and put that on deck and left us with it and put a cot there instead for little baby Freya, who joins us on site all seasons now. So it's a family affair now, and it is wonderful actually because the whole team is like one big family. Not to mention that
your daughter and son,
yes,
will be joining us in the winter as well. Yes. So it will be even a bigger family affair.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fantastic.
Wonderful, guys. We need to go. Our time is up. Thank you so much. This was wonderful, and I can't wait for some new excitement to come out that you can talk about, and we'll have you back on and get the update.
Well, hopefully we can do a show live from Silsila in our autumn season. We're going to be there from the 1st of November through to the 17th of December.
Well, that is definitely a possibility.
Yeah, and we can bring you live action.
At 2:00 in the morning?
At 2:00. No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right, guys. The music's going to come up, so I am going to let you go. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Maria Nilsson and John Ward. Their website is friendsofcecilia.com. So please do check it out. Support what they're doing because it is just so exciting. I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.